Welcome to the Non-Sequitur Show. Continual watching beyond this point may result in terminal face palming and a complete loss of wokeness. You have been warned.
All right. Welcome, everyone. We have an interesting topic tonight, I think. Is Christianity a logically coherent worldview or a logical worldview? But before we get started here, I have a couple questions to ask my guest, okay? So I have two people in here. I have Gnostic Informant, and I've got Jonathan Sheffield, who will introduce themselves here in a second. Hopefully you guys can hear me, so let me know if you guys have any audio issues, any video issues, anything like that. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions based upon some issues I've had in the past related to these types of subject matter. You guys cool with that? I'm putting you on the spot here because I told you guys to ask you questions. I didn't tell you what they're going to work, what they're going to be, right? Okay. So for first question, I want to kind of get off the bat. Neither of you want to advocate the government killing people that are gay, correct?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, just go with yes. Just go with correct. Yes. Okay,
yes.
You're not advocating for that. Neither of you guys hate Jews.
No, and just to let everyone know, for sake, my mom was Jewish, which even though I grew up under the Anglican tradition,
me too. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, that's all. So I am
Mazel
Jewish.
tov.
Shalom.
Shalom. Yes.
And I'm from Brooklyn, New York, so that's
she was too, actually. Yeah, my mom's from Brooklyn. Yeah, I did not know that. So yes, we're Jewish. And the third question is: neither of you advocate for an ethno-state.
No.
Okay. I think we're going to be safe. I don't think we're going to have too much of a dumpster fire here. If we do, that's fine. Things go that way. But I don't think so. Both of you guys have a very intelligent, coherent argumentation. I've listened to both of you guys' videos, and I've known you guys for a few. But you guys want to argue on this particular topic of is Christianity a logically coherent worldview? Jonathan, you obviously think so. Gnostic, you don't think so. So introduce yourselves. Jonathan, I'm going to let you go first, and then you guys are going to have a 5-minute kind of argument about why you think that's a particular case, and have a back and forth. So you guys let to know the audience. I usually get myself involved in these discussions, but this particular topic, I'm probably going to be a lot more hands off, only because I don't have much of a dog in the fight, and it's very theologically based rather than philosophically based. So I don't know all about it. I just don't. And so they're gonna be talking about biblical scriptures and this other stuff, and I'm just gonna be nodding my head along, pretending that I know what they're talking about. All right. So Jonathan, introduce yourself and let people know who you are.
Okay. Well, my name is Jonathan Sheffield, originally from Brooklyn, New York. Over the last probably 6 or 7 years, I've been focusing on the study of apologetics, and my ministry has been dedicated to the reliability of the New and the Old Testament. I've kind of created a new genre in Christian apologetics by putting them to 2D and 3D animations. While most of the subjects I tackle deals with the historicity of the New Testament, the textual transmission, and some core historical foundations for Christianity. I do thank Neil for inviting me on, along with Steve, to discuss this topic. And I do want to give a shout out real quick to 2 students that I work with, Matthew Harada, for helping me open up my mind to this issue and share a lot of his ideas, and Selah Cordova, who's actually going to be joining me on another debate in May, but has helped me understand this question as well.
Awesome. Well, hi to your students out there. Hopefully they'll be entertained and informed. We've already got a super chat at the very beginning. Gaius Julius Windix. What an interesting name. Gaius Julius Windix. I'm not making this up. $1.99. True Gnosis. Interesting.
That's one of my regulars on my channel.
Oh, okay.
He's on my channel.
Well,
yeah.
Welcome. Okay. I guess you brought your own rooting squad. Yay.
Probably, yeah. Hopefully.
All right, Gnostic, go ahead and introduce yourself as well, and then we'll kind of like start the topic.
My name is Neil. I have a channel called Gnostic Informant. It is a channel about the history of religions, mythology, a little bit of philosophy, but history of religion, stuff like that, comparing religious texts, comparative religion, stuff like that. Bring on a lot of PhDs. Like I'm David Little. I just released a video with him today about the secret revelation of John, some Gnostic stuff, and it's very critical as well. And Derek Lambert from Myth Vision has been he's a good friend of mine. He's been helping me out a lot. If it wasn't for him, I'd probably have like 500 subscribers. But this guy's been really giving me a lot of exposure and helping me out. So I got to thank him for that.
I'm gonna have to have him on next time we talk to him.
Let
him know that I'm interested in having him on. I know he's had some issues with Robert Price lately. That would be an interesting topic for him if he wants to. Go ahead and send an invite to him. Let me know. I will be happy to have him on because I like to talk about that subject as well. And he was kind of integrally involved in that particular kerfluffle. To say the least. So, just real quick, I'm going to ask you a question on the Gnosis thing. Can you briefly describe to people what Gnosis is the Gnostic? Because a lot of people seem to throw these terms around, but
Gnosis would be to be as brief as possible about it. It's salvation through knowledge, a secret knowledge rather than faith.
Thank you. Secret or hidden knowledge to become one with the divine for the Gnosticism in about the 2nd century, correct?
Yeah, I mean the Gnostics thought that there was like a pleroma and that we're basically imprisoned in these flesh bodies, and by attaining Gnosis, you can escape that and become one with the pleroma.
Yep.
Which is,
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for actually putting that out there because a lot of people, like I said, they throw around the term Gnosis, and I'm like, I don't think they're using it as conventionally how I would read it. But yes, that's exactly how I would read it. All right. So anyways, let's kind of get started. Oh, Jonathan, you want to add on that? Sure.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's great. Actually, me and Neil should be talking about that as well because I know that the Gnostics, felt that the Gnosis left Jesus on the cross, and so I think this that would make for a very good.
Yeah, there was actually ones that actually thought Jesus was divine and ones that weren't, if I remember correctly, weren't there?
Yeah. Right. Yep.
Now, the only reason I have an interest in that is again, people love that Gnostic atheist crap, and I'm always writing articles on why that's just super silly. And I still get pushback on that, by the way. I still get a lot of pushback, but I'm like, look, all you got to do is just go show my logic wrong. That's it. So if you show my logic wrong, I'm going to retract my work. I'll say, yes, I messed up, or I'll fix it, or I'll shore it up. But nobody's ever done that before. Not one person. One person has tried. One person. And at the end of the discussion, they're like, yeah, I don't think I'm quite there yet. They're like, they haven't quite figured it out. But it was really a good attempt. But anyway, speaking about logical, let's get into the discussion here. We got another super chat. Option select, $2 Canadian. I hope your ex-co-host goes to jail. He already went to jail. Matter of fact, he actually went to jail. He did spend some time in jail, and he was stuck in jail on a $10,000 bond for contempt of court. Yes, that's a fact. So thank you for that, though, option select. All right, so Jonathan, why don't you start us off here about why you think Christianity is logically, logically coherent worldview. I think that's the best way to put it.
Okay, so is Christianity a logical worldview? Now, in answering this question, I need to take initially under consideration that for approximately half the Roman Empire, who had claimed allegiance to the Christian faith by 400 AD, it was the logical worldview. This group represented over 30 million people, stepping away from the Hellenistic philosophy of the Greek and Roman-speaking world for this Christian worldview. We see this among, the learned class, including such men as Augustine of Hippo, the Cappadocian Fathers, Justin Martyr, Constantine the Great, and others. And given this Christian worldview, it was no longer logical to keep the pagan temples open, to continue the sacrificial practices, of the temples. So hence under Constantine II, superstition was ordered to be ceased, the madness of the sacrifice abolished, and the temples were forced to close down. And furthermore, it was no longer logical to worship the emperor as God, all due to this Christian worldview. And under the pagan worldview, according to Tom Holland, the starving deserved no sympathy, beggars were best rounded up and deported, pity risks undermined a man's self-control. And we see in the heroes of the Iliad, the favorites of the gods, they had scorned the weak and the downtrodden. The Christian value system changed all of this, with a God as part of a worldview that was closer to the weak than to the mighty, a God closer to the poor than it was to the rich. Any beggar, any criminal might be Christ. We also see the uniquely Christian idea of monogamy and the protection of children in Christianity, who opposed the Greek practice of infanticide. Now, another factor for me was the Christian worldview also brought about the idea that the world was created good that we see in Genesis. So we can now study the laws of the universe and trust them, a concept found in the writings of Sir Francis Bacon, which led him to introduce the scientific method. Tom Holland also points out it was through the Christian worldview that led to the emergence of science in the 19th century, a field never truly realized in the ancient world, considering in Hinduism, the world is an illusion that we need to meditate out of. And for the Greeks, the material world was evil or a lower order created by the demiurge, which explains why Aristotle did not pick up the rocks to see which one dropped faster, but Galileo did. As a result of the explosion of the Christian worldview in history, Dr. Ehrman has stated that the triumph of Christianity proved to be the single greatest cultural transformation our world has ever seen. And we would never have had the Middle Ages, the Reformation, the Renaissance, or modernity as we know it without Christianity. Even when we look at the framers of the United States, they felt that this worldview was the logical one to build our nation upon. While Jefferson obviously didn't believe in miracles, he did align with the biblical ideas of moral truth and law and of mankind's dignity and fallen condition as found in the Sermon on the Mount. While our society does believe in capitalism as the logical system for humanity, this system, according to Marx, was created in the mind of a monk. That is obviously Luther, who got his ideas from the Bible. Even Max Weber argues this thesis that the Puritan ethics and ideas influenced the development of capitalism. So all things considered, most would agree that the aforementioned ideas of the Christian worldview that we find in the scripture are the logical and practical proposition for society as a whole. However, the real divide that maybe me and Neil will probably get into is over the notion of the supernatural. But I think it's important as I close out that we need to keep in mind most civilizations up until the time of the Enlightenment believed in gods or the Great Spirit. Therefore, from my perspective, is the enlightened reason of the 18th and 19th centuries the logical proposition for society, considering, as Nikolai Berdyaev once noted, that this reason had detached itself from the experience of humanity and broke communion with the reason of universal history on this issue. So I would say no. The state of morality and moral order would then hang in the balance, given that this idea that we see in Dostoevsky, that without God, all things are permitted, which then becomes a very real threat in society. Therefore, I do believe Christianity to be the logical worldview.
Was that a fourier into Jordan Peterson's? Remember Jordan Peterson answered that very same thing about about
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, atheist morality. Go to Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment.
Yeah,
okay, but yeah, that was a really good, actually really good opening.
From him. My dad actually brought it up to me. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the work, but he had brought that up. I was like, yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good opening because I think Gnostic might have a bit of a challenge here because Christianity is formidable. I mean, Christianity has a huge impact and it had changed the course of history. By the way, I let you guys know earlier. I'm not scratching myself. I have a neurotic dog that just will not leave me alone. Hey, remember G-Cat? This is Gdog. This is Steve Dog. What do we call this? Look at that. He's just so neurotic. He's so cute though. But he just will not leave me alone. So my apologies. Not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Because I'm a dog lover. So anyways, go for it.
What probably, in my opinion, would be perfectly logical if it didn't claim to be the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And this is where I see it's illogical. Because the Old Testament is the New Testament, which claims to fulfill the Old Testament, doesn't. And in fact, it actually does the opposite. Whereas the Old Testament, the Messiah is supposed to be a king who is supposed to unite the 12 tribes and usher in what is known as Olam Haba, the world to come, which is heaven on earth. Neither of those things happened. The 12 tribes are dispersed. There's a diaspora. The Roman Empire comes in and conquers and destroys the temple. And there's no kingdom on earth. There's nowhere in the Old Testament where it says the Messiah is supposed to be God himself or even the Son of God. He's just supposed to be a king like David. Speaking of David, there's another contradiction in the text where Jesus is supposed to be of the lineage of David, which is what they're trying to fulfill the Old Testament, like I said before. But he actually is not, because if you look at the two genealogies given, one in Luke, one in Matthew, they're different from each other. And one would say, well, one's Mary and one's Joseph, but they're not. They both have Joseph in the genealogy. In one of them, it's Joseph, son of Heli, and the other one is Joseph, son of Jacob. Neither of them say Mary in them. In fact, the church tradition says that Mary is actually the daughter of Joachim and Anne, which neither of those two names are in any of the genealogies. So if he was the son of David, it's not through Mary, and it's not through the genealogies, because the genealogies he's not born from Joseph. He's into miracle birth. So it's just an adoption, basically. But like I said, both of them are different, so they contradict each other in that sense. We don't have a clear genealogy of David to Jesus. It's just one guy said it in this one, another guy says it in this one. The law, which is the perfect, pure law given from God to Moses, is not sustained. It's actually reversed. So in the sense where, for example, the Ten Commandments it's the only part of the Old Testament where there's literally an etching from the hand of God given to Moses that says these will never change. And but by the time you get to the era in the church that you talked about with Constantine and the Nicene Creed, these 10 Commandments are altered. They take certain words out. The no other gods besides Yahweh becomes a change to you shall not have strange gods before me. And then they take number 2, the second commandment, which is you shall not make it yourself an idol. They just skip that and go right to the third one, which is you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy gets changed to remember keep the holy day of the Lord's day. And that's number 4, which is now number 3. And I guess it's Sunday now. But the reason why I bring that up is because that alone makes it illogical, because why would God hand down laws to Moses and not tell them, by the way, when I have a son who I'm going to give to you, he's going to change all this. So none of this is going to matter. It's all going to be on if you believe in my son or not. And even Jesus himself, when he's asked, how do I get to heaven? He says to follow the law, follow the commandments. He doesn't say believe in me. He says to follow the commandments. And that is in I'm sorry. Yeah, but I don't have that in front of me right now. But yeah, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. Anyways, but I'll say this. So if Jesus comes and it's all about him now, then how do you explain in the Book of Chronicles when Manasseh, who is the worst king of all, he rules for 50 years, completely wicked in the eyes of the Lord. He's setting up idols and he's doing all this wicked sacrificing and not following the laws. And all of a sudden, at the end of his life, he repents and says he's sorry, and he repents and says Yahweh is God, and he's forgiven. There's no Jesus, no nothing. So I say that my question would be, what would be the point of having all of these laws put in place by Yahweh for the nation of Israel, who he chooses to be his beacon of light to the rest of the world, if it's all just going to not matter in the end, and he's just going to give him his son and say, forget all that, just ignore all that. And then the last thing I want to say is, if the Old Testament is not historically accurate, if Adam and Eve didn't really die, or didn't really eat the fruit, or if the flood didn't actually happen, we didn't restart with the seed of Noah, which I think you would agree on. These didn't happen 4,000, 6,000 years ago. These are more metaphors. If these aren't really true, like if Adam and Eve didn't really eat the fruit, then what is sin anyway? If it's just like some metaphor concept, why would I have to worry about sin if it's just a myth? I think that's 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, you make a really good point on that, and that's, if people want to go watch the last thing I put up, I put a short up, and I'm going to try to do more of them, but I put a little short up, and one of the things I had brought up was the Reasons to Believe it asked me to do a 1 minute to 2 minute little blurb about what I think was the best argument for atheism, and some of the things you brought up is like the whole thing is contingent upon belief. It seems like your salvation is contingent upon just believe in Christ, grace, you're saved. It seems to negate everything else that you just put out there. And also God had revealed himself many times in the Old Testament to many people, and as a non-resistant non-believer, I'm sitting here going, okay, reveal yourself. If he wants to reveal himself to me, I'm not asking him. I asked for a sign, but he could do so. But it seems to be a very different mindset from like Old Testament to New Testament to even now about the rules and regulations of Christianity, because now it's just like, you believe you're saved kind of stuff, and it seems to eliminate a lot of the predecessor stuff. But anyways, Jonathan, what do you think about that? Because I think Neil's made some good points there.
Yeah, no, and I think it's fair to bring up, and interesting enough, me and Neil has talked text critical issues before separately on there. So there's obviously a lot of things that he brings up, obviously contradictions, obviously some of the promises or the prophecies. I guess the way they're worded in the Old Testament seems not to jive, but actually contradict what we're seeing in the New Testament, the Genesis story. First, number of valid criticisms, and I do understand how some of these things, in many cases, has left people to leave the Christian faith. Bart Ehrman, one of them, as he started exploring these issues, this is one of the prime reasons why he left. So I think it's important for Christians to address that issue. But one of the things I do want to bring up in this subject, to maybe also look at it from a different perspective on these issues. Now, obviously, I'm a big J.R. Tolkien fan, C.S. Lewis as well, being an Anglican. Now, Tolkien had wrote to his son Christopher about the beauty of the Christian story, especially regarding the Eden myth. And Tolkien thought it was kind of a worrying consequence of people kind of getting rid of the Genesis creation account in the face of modern science, in that it would cause one to sort of forget the beauty of the matter as a story. And one of the things he wrote is the beauty of the story is having this kind of permanent value. And when we look at the Christianity as a whole, even encompassing the Old Testament, he had these words to say, that a man who disbelieved the Christian or Old Testament story as fact, but continually fed on it as myth, would perhaps be more spiritually alive than the one who assented and did not think much about it. The modernist need not to be called a fool or a hypocrite because he obstinately retains, even in the midst of his intellectual atheism, The language, rites, sacraments, and story of the Christians. The poor man may be clinging with a wisdom he himself by no means understands, but that which to him has value, which is his life. While I do understand the concern, because if we're obviously promoting this as history, as fact, as fulfillment of the prophecy, does it call into question our entire logical framework or our worldview that we want to push on society? So I do get that from Neil's argument, and it's a very fair assumption. But what do we lose out from the story itself? And I think, obviously C.S. Lewis writes on this, the Christianity as sort of the true myth. But one of the elements that, Tolkien introduces is the beauty of the story as well. And in that story, we do get a lot of value out of it. So would that, in light of maybe the contradictions that you may see, would that suffice to still add a level of value to Christianity as a logical perspective, given the beauty of the story, a lot of the moral guidelines that have become, a foundation of the fabric of society, for people that do believe in a worldview to follow, even if in some aspects we fail to actually prove our case. And I'll turn it over to Neil from there.
I actually think that when you look before Christianity, like when you look at the times of the Romans and Greeks, in the Roman Republic days and the Hellenistic era, I think science was already on the rise. Science and, sort of the Stoic mentality, the sort of these different sort of philosophical avenues were already starting to rise before Christianity. I'm not saying that Christianity held that stuff back, but I don't think it was the reason why we get to the Enlightenment. I think the reason why we get to the Enlightenment was taking a step back from fundamentalist type, theocracy, having a pope that has all the power. I think once we get away from that and we start to have like a Protestant revolution and all that stuff, that's when we have an enlightenment, when people start to actually question these things. I think it's sort of the opposite of that. I wonder what you think about that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, I agree with you on Christianity being sort of the great myth of myths, but I think that it should stand in its own category rather than trying to be the fulfillment of the Jewish scriptures. It should have, which is, I guess it's too late now, but I think a better route would have been to be a fulfillment of all the scriptures, which I actually think it kind of is that. I think they try to go, I think there's a lot of Bacchic mysteries being involved, a lot of Egyptian influence in there, as well as even some mimesis from Homer and Hesiod. I think there's a lot of that to be in there. I think that those should be brought up more and celebrated more, rather than, oh no, don't look at that, it's all about the Jewish scriptures. I think that's a detrimental to Christianity, for it trying to just be a fulfillment of the Jewish scripture, that the Jews really were these chosen nations. And I think it would have been better if Christianity would have branded itself as more of a world religion in that sense.
I think you're just making up words now. Do you think it's a little bit like evolution? Evolution has to work on prior structures and things that are already existing. So now you have Christianity that it obviously had roots prior to that, and so it has to like somehow involve all of it and ingrain all of it and account for all of it. And there seems to be, there's 66 books of the Bible. There's 40 plus people that probably wrote it, all have differing viewpoints. And all of a sudden you're supposed to have, in 2022, a coherent, worldview for Christianity that has to account for all the other things that people have said over, last couple thousands of years. Yes. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that because, again, like evolution has to draw upon things that are already existing. Maybe Christianity, because obviously the religion is not going to come de novo, right? It's not going to be like, boom, here's Christianity. It drew out of prior religions, right? So that's probably why there seems to be a lot of contradictions and confusion, because it has years and years and years of history. But Jonathan.
Yeah, that is an interesting thought. I think C.S. Lewis kind of provides a little context around there as well, in saying that the pagan stories are God expressing himself through the minds of the poet, using some images as he found there, while Christianity is God expressing himself through what we call real things. I obviously, I think there is a real connection. Even someone with a Jewish background that obviously was raised in the Anglican Communion. I think one thing I have to consider is that most of the early converts to Christianity were Jews. I think there is this notion that we do find in the Jewish scriptures, as difficult it may be to really get through some of that interpretation of some promised Messiah. Obviously, many Jews believe that was in Bar Kokhba, that they recognized that. And we see with the Jews of the Middle Ages, obviously them spending a lot of time dealing with the passage Isaiah 53, obviously against the pressure from a number of Christians on there. So I think there was always this idea of some sort of savior that would come. And I think there's image in there about a worldly kingdom that Neil was talking about, and this kind of suffering servant that we see. And I see how that can add a lot of confusion. Even going back to the beginning of Moses, Moses says, "Someone will come after me." Now the Muslims say that's Muhammad. Us Christians say it's Jesus. So I just had to deal with these polemics against both groups and saying, well, you're basically both wrong here. But I do think there are issues with that. I would say Christianity, in some aspects, Muslims, there is this tie to Judaism, or the people of the book, as the Muslims would say. So I would say there is this natural connection. I would say probably Christianity more than Islam. But I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts. Whether it drew on it from a combination of worldviews coming up that created the byproduct of Christianity, I definitely see, a valid viewpoint from that side.
Yep.
I'll throw this in real quick and let you speak, Neil.
Oh, sorry, real quick. I didn't know I was muted on that. Let me just throw it out for the audience real quick. I was telling them inside this Skype call here. I'm sorry. For the outside, is that the three Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, are mutually exclusive from each other because they're contraries. That they can all be false, but they can't all be true. But if one is true, the other two are false. And so I asked them, how is it that all three cannot be logically coherent? All three of them can't be possibly true. So how do we determine which one is more logically consistent than the other ones, as opposed to by the way, we're both Jews, but again, they're looking at the same God, but they're looking at it very, very differently based upon the same readings.
Yeah. You can go first. I have something to say about this stuff for sure.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's interesting that Maimonides, obviously you had a Muslim scholar in the Middle Ages, and then you have Thomas Aquinas, all using Aristotle's logic to prove each of their religions. And somehow they were able to do that, even though kind of violates Aristotle's law of non-contradiction. How you use Aquinas, Maimonides, and the Muslim scholar, I forget his name, they all tried to use Aristotle's logic to prove their view. But I would say, yes, they all can't be true. But I would say Judaism or Christianity is a fulfillment of that prophecy. So I think in some ways, or at least I understand it, that Judaism would still be true, but doesn't recognize the fulfillment or the coming of the Messiah, which probably bodes well for Christianity.
Well, that would mean that they're false, though. They made a significant error if they didn't recognize the Messiah, because they were expecting the Messiah. As Neil pointed out, they expected the Messiah, I believe, to be a king, not something of divine origin. So they didn't recognize Jesus to be that fulfillment of that prophecy. But they would be wrong on that. I mean, granted, again, they are worshiping the same deity, but Jews have a very, very different perspective on God than modern Christians, and even the Christians 2,000 years ago. Very, very different.
Yeah, and this is basically the whole point of my argument, is that you can't, all these three can't be true at the same time. So, but the thing about Christianity and Islam is they need some level of Judaism to be true, for them to be true. So they're both working out of Judaism.
Point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So that's where the question is. And then where does Judaism fall off and Christianity become the true one? Or you understand what I'm saying? And like, I think that's what I've been getting at the whole time, is that Judaism you're working within the Judaism theology, and you're saying, okay, Adam and Eve, the reason why we're all going to hell is because of sins. Adam and Eve ate from both Islam and Christianity agree on this part. But then it's like, then they branch off into their own little theologies, if that makes sense. But like, that's the question, is where does Judaism fall off and Christianity become true? Because like you said, they both can't be true.
Yeah, no, it is a good question. In a lot of ways, I look at Judaism as the pathway for Christianity, and it set everything up, or prepared the way for the Christian worldview. Obviously, if you don't have the temple, you don't have Jesus coming in and making these predictions. But does that lean back to Judaism then, which still contains a lot of this stuff?
I was told, Jonathan, by a Christian once, that the Jewish people, which you and I would be considered to be Jewish in the eyes of the temple,
yes,
they're saved. They're de facto saved because of the chosen people. And I'm like, and I actually, now that I think about it, it's actually more than one Christian has told me that. Yeah. Because that was a covenant that God had with the David and the Israelites, I guess. But I think there needs to be recognized is that, yes, all these things do draw from the foundation of Judaism. But Neil makes a very good point that they separate themselves to be such a degree and so different from each other that obviously they can't all be true, that there is a contradiction there. I mean, because again, if all three cannot be true at the same time, or even if two out of the three can't be true at the same time, there are contradictions involved between them. So you'd have to show that for some reason the Christian worldview is the one, logically consistent, the one that's true over the other true, even if you acknowledge that it came from Judaism. If you've acknowledged that the base is Judaism, they fail to recognize a very critical aspect of the religion, which means that Judaism, I would put Judaism as false then at that point, right? Because if they're making these predictions, they're saying, hey, look, we're waiting for this Messiah to come save us, and they don't recognize that the Messiah already came and went, and supposedly supposed to return, which obviously has not happened yet. I would put that then the Judaism is false, because they're waiting for something that just won't happen. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so too. And I think Paul in Hebrews, kind of expresses this. We no longer need the sacrifices, and
right, the burnt offerings and things of that nature. Right.
Yeah, and so I would agree with that point too. Christianity, and this is why we see the emergence of Western civilization taking hold in the 4th century with that Christian foundation. And while I do understand Neil's aspect of the law, I think, with Jesus, it's a same law, but new understanding, or it wasn't rightly understood, or Jews maybe didn't rightly understood it. And I think this value system really gets to shine forth in our society. And for me, at the end of the day, does this become the most logical worldview for society? True, not true. Is this a logical proposition for our society? Being that, Christianity is the myth of all myths.
So when you say myth of all myths, I immediately think of, in today's culture, we have movies and music. And a lot of times really good directors can make a really good film that can change the way people look at the world, and it becomes its own logos, its own myth in its own sense. What's wrong with that as opposed to having a dogmatic religion?
My fear, I kind of brought this up, not to saying that it will naturally lead to chaos or, the moral fabric of our society, dismantling. But I see the enlightened reason with that break from human experience. So, in some sense, all the ancient civilizations up until that time did believe in a God. They did have some essence of dogmaticism or theology or their outlook or philosophy of life. And I think, without that, and that's why I kind of brought up Dostoevsky's, kind of little meme there on, without God, everything's permitted. And do we see that aspect, not trying to draw a correlation to communism or stuff like that, but there we obviously saw the moral order broke down. So with, with the Enlightenment, we do see an emergence of a different worldview. And from a logical construct, was the logical proposition to break with human experience and the reason of universal history on this issue of gods?
I would say to that, because I think you're assuming that the Enlightenment is sort of like a product of centuries of Christianity, but I think it's the opposite. I think that they're looking back at the time of the Athenian law codes with the democracy and constitutional republics. You had people like Democritus and Epicurus who thought that there was no Platonic heaven and hell. This was it. Like, this is all atoms and void, which they were right to a sense. They were also wrong about some things, but I think that what the Enlightenment actually was reverting back to that sort of worldview and getting away from, not that Christianity was all horrible and just ruined the world, but I also don't think we should give it all the credit for how I think any religion could have been the state religion, and eventually we would have progress was inevitable just through evolution. That's what I think.
Two things. Obviously, if we look at the civilizations under Islam, obviously, would you agree that wouldn't have enhanced society the way Christianity has for the West?
Now, yes, to a certain there was parts in time where there was Islamic countries who were, really into science and astronomy and math, and the word algebra is actually a term from Arabic. So it's not, I wouldn't just blame it on just Islam, but I would blame it on dogmatist theocracy. I think it could be any religion, but once it becomes the theocracy and the dogmatism, that's when things go sour, in my opinion. I think when you have a free and open society where people can challenge each other like we're doing right now, then it's healthy. Then fine. People should be able to worship whatever they want. But I also don't think that should be the cornerstone of a society. It shouldn't just be a religion.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think my dad's from Rhode Island, so Roger Williams is like one of his biggest heroes. And he understood that the Garden of Eden and the state should be hedged. So this idea of separation of church and state, comes out of an Orthodox Christian viewpoint of, while obviously we allow freedom of religion, we're also preventing a national state entity from enforcing it upon everyone. Would you still see that as the byproduct, not of rationalism, but Christianity, or the words of Jesus, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and give unto God? Would you see that more from the rationalists or the byproduct of Orthodox Christianity?
I think you could credit some of the Christian teachings to some of what you're saying, but yeah, I wouldn't say, but like I said, I wouldn't give it all the credit. I would just say it was at the right place at the right time. The Middle Ages came around, Christianity became the thing, and everything else is what happened. Like it just happened that way.
Yeah, it just happened that way. But somebody had pointed out that like Christianity wasn't exactly spread across the world by the most the normal means. It wasn't like people just started believing. They were forced to believe Christianity in many places. It was especially during the Inquisitions and people going to Africa and these missionaries. I mean, it was forced upon people. It was believe or die. Even Islam has a very similar structure. Real quick though, I have a super chat, which is a good question. Flamo says, is the law of non-contradiction a bad axiom? No, matter of fact, Aristotle actually thought that the law of non-contradiction was the only real axiom to be predicated upon. The law of excluded middle and the law of the law of identity. That's what Aristotle thought was fundamental. He had some problems with the law of excluded middle, but the law of non-contradiction, it's not a bad axiom for classical logic. It just does. You don't need to have it for other forms of logic. There are forms of logic where you can have what's called truth gluts, where you can have pure consistent logic where it doesn't necessarily hold. And so, sure, it's a great axiom for classical logic. Would you agree, Jonathan? Because you had mentioned that earlier about the law of non-contradiction.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So thank you, Flamo, for $2. But yeah, it's definitely not a bad axiom, but it's not a necessary axiom. I personally think the only necessary axiom is identity. I really think that is foundational. It exists in all possible worlds. I don't see how you could formulate a logically consistent system without identity. I don't know what it would even mean, but anyways, okay, back to topic. Sorry.
Neil, one of my and if you could jump on this one as well, I think I think one of the problems I have with the rationalists, even though they brought in a lot of good things, is this idea that we see challenged in the romantic movement against rationalism, is this whole idea of the human experience of fantasy or the myths. And this is why I kind of lean towards the rationalist attack on the sacred histories or the sacred religions. Was not a good proposition for society. It's something we've universally believed in. It's part of our framework for most of civilization, or most civilizations. And it gets away with this idea of fantasy, which for a more rational position. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I struggle with what is the end game of the going, like, for example, the rationalist, the naturalist, we have like a movement that brings medicine, science, the standard of living is higher, better systems in all sorts of ways of life. Whereas what's the alternative to that? I mean, you could say, yeah, everyone's godless and then whatever, but what do you oppose about that is what I'm asking.
I think one of my chief concerns is, and I'm not saying that there's a natural correlation with atheism and communism and the reign of terror. I do see those events. I'm not saying there's a natural correlation, but we do bring this up. Now, obviously, I get in Christianity or these dogmatic faiths, you do see the Inquisition. Obviously, you have the Crusades. Obviously, the last one that wasn't too good. Obviously, as an Anglican, we saw what happened for the Puritans in England and the Civil War that caused. So obviously, there's a lot of bad things that do come out of it. But where is that balance? And I think, for me, the fear is the neglect or the total disconnect from universal history on this is a real threat to the moral order. We see postmodernism come in, the old sophistry where truth doesn't matter anymore. So I'm trying to see how this all ties together. And that's why I would say, the Christian worldview, when we talk about, obviously, an emphasis, and the Protestants were real big on the law. Obviously, Inquisition was horrible. But, when we talk about the Protestant work ethic, what Marx understood came out of the Reformation with capitalism. I see moving away from that type of system. What is the alternative? What do we get? And is that fear, reign of terror, communism, what we saw with Hitler, becomes the byproduct of getting away from the Christian worldview?
But I mean, I will take Hitler, for example. This was not somebody who was driven by atheism or driven by opposition to
the Norse gods and
yeah, and I mean, he even said, I'm a Catholic and I do the work of God the Father as in opposing the Jew. Like, that's literally written in Mein Kampf. And then as far as the communism and all those things, I just don't see how this would be related to getting away from a theocracy type of worldview, or if that makes sense. My thing is this, these religions all are centered around these laws about sin. This is what I think is the worst thing about religion, is the idea of sin, where people have are naturally certain ways, whether they're gay or trans or whatever it is, and all of a sudden they're condemned as sinner, where they have no control over these things. And I'll admit, Christianity has the lesser evil of the other ones, where it's like, okay, you're forgiven, but just repent. But you still have to repent. You still have to admit that you're wrong.
I would say Judaism's lesser evil. They don't give a damn. They're just you don't see Jews going around going, "Oh, you eat this matzah bra, you're damned." They're not really aggressive.
Well, some people should, because they should try it.
I'm a big fan of matzah bra, but I mean, they're not. Islam and Christianity, especially Islam, as part of their belief system, is that they need to go convert people. They're required to. I don't think that Judaism has any stipulation. We're like, go dance and have fun.
You mean like modern? You're talking about modern times?
Yeah, modern times.
Oh,
yeah,
I
it's
agree.
very, very imperialistic, very expansionist.
I agree, and that's what I would prefer. Is like, okay, people have their faith, they believe what they believe, but they're not trying to convert everyone else to, oh, you're wrong, you're a sinner, you need to do this.
Right, exactly.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, we've seen a rise in fundamentalism that obviously breeds this other side of the Christian worldview, which I think we would all see. Now, obviously, I think it's important for a Christian, before we start preaching morality, we first have to defend the historicity of the Bible, the reliability of the Bible, and to show that this is the one true God, before we can even get into any moral conversations. But I do think, as part of the social contract or social contract, we did see in the Greek civilization, the Roman civilization, a lot of the issues that are coming up today, that what makes sense for a productive society. When we think about these different issues, I'm not saying anyone has to browbeat or dogmatic position, but we still have to look at, both the Greeks and the Romans realized that this was a logical worldview, at least for their societies, to give up some of these practices. I know infanticide and exposing your children to the outside, like the Spartans would do. And obviously, they had different questions on homosexuality, the value in their society of what it brings. So I don't think it's solely a Christian issue. I think all societies have dealt with these issues. I do see that the Romans and the Greeks eventually decided that Christianity was the right worldview for their society. So, and maybe we need to look at it from that side. Not to say we have to browbeat anybody, but maybe that needs to be a larger part of the community discussion, what best works for society.
Well, I think we all agree that smashing babies against rocks is probably bad for society. God, I don't know. The Old Testament seems to be a lot of God killing and doing a bunch of a moral monster type stuff. The Old Testament God seems to be a lot different from the New Testament God. Again, I'm not a theologian. I let you guys know, yes, I have read the Bible. I'm familiar with the topics, but I just don't get into much of those discussions. But I do notice a very distinct difference between the way Yahweh is portrayed in the Old Testament as this real, vile, revengeful, spiteful, manipulative, it's kind of an evil God. I mean, almost like a Malak type God or Baal or something. And then in the New Testament, it's all love and peace. And because correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, real quick, but nowhere in the New Testament does Jesus say, "I love you all." I don't think he doesn't say. I don't think anywhere Jesus says he loves anybody. Does he?
I don't know if he says those specific words. He does say that love is the fulfillment.
Right. But he never says that he personally.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I don't think that he does, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, it's a very different mindset, though, because as you brought up earlier, it is now, okay, belief in the Son of God, believe that Jesus is this being that was, divine, that came from God, that for some reason took all the sins and for 3 days became resurrected. And again, I don't understand the whole blood sacrifice thing. I don't know why there's some metaphysical law that requires something like that. It just seems really odd to me that, as you put out, there's so much predecessors to this. Oh, these all the things you need to do. There's 613, Levitical laws in the mitzvah, and all these things were so important. You know what? Screw all that. Just believe in Christ. It's a very different type of system.
But the funny part about that is that they're acknowledging that this system is valid because Jesus becomes the lamb. He becomes the sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not saying that that's wrong. They're saying, oh, yeah, that's all right. But we got the ultimate, the end all be all of sacrifices, and that's Jesus. And there's sort of a mimesis of Leviticus 16, where they take the two goats. One is the scapegoat and the other one's the sacrifice. They let one free, Barnabas, and then they sacrifice the other one. You see that in the narrative about Jesus in front of Pilate, as well as him being the lamb, which is another part of Leviticus, where the lamb is the sin offering for Passover. So I mean, that's interesting. And then another thing I wanted to point out is that Marcion had a solution to all this. Marcion's one of the church fathers from the 2nd century. He was condemned later as a heretic, but at the time he was huge. He was one of the biggest theologians of the time in all the Roman Empire. And he thought that Yahweh was actually the demiurge, which is the creator, an evil creator, and that we need to get away from him. We need to be saved from him through Jesus.
Was that more like a theistic personalism thing, where you have this the emerge that God is sustaining everything, but he's not.
But he doesn't like you.
Yeah, he's not this benevolent, I love you kind of stuff. He's just like kind of a dick.
That's what Marcion believed. Okay. That's what that was. Yeah. Yep. And by the way, Marcion was the first Christian who put together a canon of New Testament. He had like 5 books of Paul and I think it was Luke, Acts, and Revelation or something like that. I'm probably wrong, but he was the first person to actually put together a canon set of books.
Yeah, I think it was Luke and 10 letters of Paul that he took to frame. But yeah, he obviously came up on the scene, which created obviously a big response in the ancient world. I do think going back to and Neil accurately addressed, he obviously had this kind of Neoplatonic view that the body is the sepulcher of the soul, and the old god, the demiurge, and all this horror. The one thing I would say that's relevant to this discussion of the worldview, if you think about it, even yourself, Steve, as a Jew, we understand that obviously God, obviously didn't want the Jews to get influenced by the Canaanites, because what happened when they did, they started taking on their practices. So to kind of promote this worldview or this society that they want to create, obviously God is, destroy all that, because if you don't, this is what your society is going to look like. In a lot of ways, when we see the transformation of Christianity, is there a reflection in the Hellenistic philosophy that looks back and looks at their societies and say, well, Christianity is the logical worldview, given our philosophies and what our societies look like? Does Christianity provide the logical proposition for society?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Real quick, he had mentioned the Canaanites, right? And the God wanted to go in and basically commit genocide. It was the Canaanites, and there's another. Was it the Amalekites or the
Amalekites?
Amalekites.
Moabites.
Yeah, and so it's funny that God supposedly gives people free will and says, look, go live your life. You have free will and stuff, but we don't want leave the Jews alone. We don't want them influenced by these people that have gone a different path. And so his solution is, I'm just going to kill them all. I don't know how moral that is. I mean, you had mentioned Dostoevsky, and I want to get in that at some point here, because I like moral theory. That do we need a God to have any kind of moral theory? I think no. I think that, matter of fact, adding God to the mix makes moral theory much more complicated, needlessly so. But to me, that's not a moral act to say, look, just because I want to protect the Jew, we're gonna go wipe out the Canaanites.
The dread decrees of God, especially as we see them in the Old Testament, they are difficult. Obviously, the gods can do what they want, even in the Greek gods. So we have this element that we can't control what the gods do. Obviously, they're going to do their sovereign. But what I see or at least in Judaism, in those events, obviously God is trying to do, make his power known to not only the Jews, but all of civilization, that he's the true God. And at the same time, create a worldview that's obviously going to honor him and preserve society as a whole.
Isn't that similar to the excuse people are using now, though? Oh, we can't have homosexuality. It's fundamentally against the fabric of society. It's destroying the family unit. It's destroying what we believe society has as this construct of what is a nuclear family. This other nonsense that people have used to say, look, we don't, God was protecting the Jew, but all of a sudden now people are using the same arguments. Oh, we need to protect society because these gay and trans people they're harming society somehow, but they never explain how. What the harm.
Yeah, and I think when we see with this Christian method, Jesus is obviously sitting with a bunch of sinners. And I think we got to be mindful of the fact that we're all humans. First, before anything, we are humans, and I think even we see in the natural law. Which I kind of brought up in the Christian, this need to help people. It's not about strength or status or how you're viewed upon by the gods, but we should create a society where everyone's welcome. That's why I really do enjoy Roger Williams' take on the freedom of religions. I think the issues on what's positive, good or bad, I think society as a whole or those communities should decide. Remember when the Spanish showed up, and saw the sacrifice that was going on, when they went down there, it was like, whoa, this is horrible. for the Mayans, it's like, well, we have to appease our God. Obviously, there's some things that I think Christianity got rid of. Obviously, the sacrifices that was happening in the temples, but I think these are bigger societal questions that we have to ask ourselves. And I think it's not only the Christian community, but communities as a whole, what works best for their society. I do think it's important to look back at other ancient civilizations because they have shared their views on these questions as well. And is there something we can learn from the ancient civilizations and how it worked in their systems?
The only thing I want to bring up real quick is that what doesn't make sense to me is like you have a God who's omni, all knowing, all powerful, everything, and he sets up this garden. He creates Adam to do a certain task, and Adam and Eve fail, and they eat this fruit, and all of a sudden their sin enters the world for eternity. Now, if I created a robot and it was flawed, wouldn't that be my own fault that I created a flawed robot? Now, I get it. These aren't robots. These are people. But it's still a creation from a higher being that's creating these things, who's all-knowing and all-powerful. And then later on, he wipes out the world with the flood. And doesn't decide not to fix it then. The sin continues up until now, where now you need to be saved through Jesus. But the whole point, what doesn't make sense to me is like, if the fact that there's a loophole here, like if we were to take, if let's say the United Nations decided that Christianity is true, well, to save the world now, all we have to do is not have any more babies, abort every single baby. Everybody says, I believe in Jesus, and we all just die and live our lives, and we're all in heaven. And then there's no one else for the eternity would ever go to heaven or hell. Ever go to hell. That loophole is actually true. Like that, you could do that, which never would happen. It's obviously nonsense, but like that could, like, that just doesn't make sense that there could be a loophole like that.
Yeah, and the way I look at it theologically, that passage, I know Theodore Bieza goes into this because obviously Adam and Eve, let's portray those characters or the story element in the Bible. If they remained in eternity without partaking of the fruit or the knowledge of good and evil, well, then they're kind of living in ignorance. They don't really understand who God is. So for my theological perspective on that passage is it was obviously Adam and Eve obviously did not have the ability to believe, and this is what they did. But what that brought about was this knowledge. And I think that was important to understanding who God was, who we are, what sin means. And for that means we have to experience it. And, we kind of see in Paul this kind of thing, what Adam brought was death. Jesus brought all this life. So we see this contrast. So I think it was necessary for that to happen. I think otherwise Adam and Eve are living in eternity in ignorance, not understanding what good and evil is. So I think it was a necessary consequence for that to happen. To explain who God was.
Well, the reason why I brought that up is that crazy loophole that it would never happen. Is the point is, what does it matter about the future of Earth? The whole point is to get salvation and go to heaven. Why even care about climate change or any of that stuff? Why don't we just all just get saved and go to heaven? Forget this world. End this world now. Let's just all go to heaven, right?
But here's the thing where, and maybe you'll appreciate from the pagans, God did call his creation good. There is this element that we need to redeem creation as well, not only ourselves. This is why we should be productive in life, this kind of element of capitalism. I think it's very important. I think when we look at the Greeks and Plato or even the Mayans, they're trying to meditate out of this world. And I think from the Christian perspective, or what we see in Genesis, that the world is called good. I think that's our opportunity to redeem the world, to enjoy life. I think, from theologically speaking, this is our call to action from God, that we should enjoy life, the pleasures of life, what it has, obviously, in accordance with a good moral compass or how he structured it. But these things are for us to enjoy. Obviously, the sin kind of hampers everything down. For me, I think that's a better worldview than, Hinduism that says we need to meditate out of society, or the samurai that must control his thoughts. So and maybe Steve, you could jump in here too.
What would happen though if, and let's say there was no religion started dying out. Let's say that over a period of time, because secular humanism is making some progress. The nuns are like myself; they're increasing. These are just demographics. This is the fact. Religiosity is on the decline overall. I think young creationism on the decline. I think that people are starting to have their own more humanistic type approaches to these types of problems. What would happen though if all religiosity, and again, I'm not advocating for the disposal of a religion. I'm not an anti-theist. I think that religion serves a purpose, at least right now. If it does disappear over time, it'll be organically. It'll be just because people have fallen away. But I don't think it should be imposed, because it's the same reason as I don't want religion imposed upon me. I don't want to impose non-religion on somebody else. It's reciprocity there, right? So what would happen though if worldwide that countries started falling away from religion, and just at certain points in time, there's just everybody believes that gods are BS. There's no such thing as gods. They're all atheist. What would happen in the Christian worldview at that point? Because I think society would function just fine. You don't?
Well, I think there's evidence to be had that communism atheism may have had some influence on that particular worldview. Obviously, I'm not promoting capitalism.
But that's a political, right? That's an economic and political position. You don't have to have. You can have an atheistic society without communism. We America is not centered on any kind of Judaic or Christian belief system. It's actually more of a secular approach. So let's say you can have we have a constitutional republic here in America. You guys are both in New York, right? Remember?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are both Americans. So we have a constitutional republic. So let's say that other countries had that, or they adopted some kind of form of limited democracy or something. You can have that just fine. You wouldn't have to entail anything like communism or socialism, or not that I have much against socialism actually nowadays, but or fascism or something.
I think a lot of social programs are probably really good. I do think what becomes the basis of our moral fabric. Even in our constitutional republic, there's obviously lots of problems that we see in it. Obviously, I'm not for mob rule at all. I think representative democracy is really good. But who's to say anything is wrong? The lobbyists. What becomes the standing or grounding for our moral foundation without?
Eudaimonia. I mean, I tend to virtue ethics. I think we can ground it in eudaimonia. I'm a big fan of promoting religion, or not promoting philosophy from the position of, look, if you want to have morals, exactly what is it you're trying to appeal to? Well, in this particular case, I'm appealing to the flourishing society, harms and benefits. I think that we all have an instinctual understanding that if we go out to harm somebody, that's an immoral act. How we quantify it, how we relate it, how we articulate it, how we put it in any kind of moral theory, those are nuances. But intuitionistly, and I believe in intuitionist logic, and I think there's some good points to have intuitionist logic. But intuition allows us to say, look, we know this is a bad thing. We know as a kid, when you do something wrong, you done something wrong. There's an instinct there. We have a moral understanding by the time we're old enough to talk. We know these things of what is right or wrong. Again, but how we articulate them and how we formulate it into a coherent moral theory, that's just learning. That's basically virtue epistemology, how to acquire this knowledge. The Christian says, look, I don't have to have a well-formulated moral theory, because I just do what God says. And according to like divine command theory, whatever God says, if you do it, then that's morally permissible. That's the good act, is that you are doing what God has commanded you of doing. But to somebody who doesn't have God, yeah, we still know right from wrong. We don't need to defer to a deity to tell us what's right and wrong, because all three of us know. Look, going out and killing babies in society is not going to go good for society. We know this. This is an objective fact. To me, that's an objective moral truth.
Yeah. Now, and you're right. There is this, natural law. We all believe it. It's encompassed on us as people or humans.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. Natural law. Yeah.
Yeah, there I agree. So I think there is something to be savored there, or not lost. But what about hope and meaning and purpose? And do we become like the Greeks, or this cyclic process that just things are just coming back over, or a meaning of history and life outside of this worldly? What do we lose from that aspect of, while the Greeks and the Romans obviously had this view that the spiritual realm, or even Marcion, that was the higher form, was better. That attainment, body is the sepulcher of the soul, you escape, you're there. What do we lose in the human condition or society? Well, we don't have that anymore.
But hope is a want, though, right? I mean, if I do take a test, I hope I did well on the test. But whether I did or didn't is still objectively going to be the case, right? My hope has no influence on that. It's just a want that I want to have done well on the test. And so hope gives us, reasons to continue to say, hey, look, I hope that I can, finish a degree. I can hope that I can do this. It gives us a motivation, because it's a want. I want to obtain some kind of goal. And so that's want is just our need, as you said, the whole human condition. We all have certain things that are ubiquitous among all humans. We all live, we all die, we all have, we need food, we all need shelter. We all have these basic necessities. And one of them, I think, is to have wants and needs, hope that, look, this is our goal. And it's just a positive outlook to it. That's it. Neil?
No, I agree. I think that as far as where we go with this void without religion, I think we do that with film and entertainment and music. I mean, we apply philosophy or principles within these sort of realms of entertainment, or like movies or something like that, because they tell us something about the world and the current state of the world. And sometimes they can sway your mind on certain things. I think it's just the principles of being honest, of being, just having that's these things that we all agree on of what people should do in certain situations, truth, honesty, all that stuff.
Exactly.
I think there's other ways to sort of put it out there rather than having it be within a religious text.
But would you say, and Steve or Neil, that when we look back, and trust me, there are problems with religion. No one's saying that they're perfect.
Sure.
But the universal experience that most civilizations have gained from this, there's a lot of positives to get out of that. So,
well, yeah, there's even such things as friendly atheism, where the atheist would say, hey, look, they believe there's no gods. However, they recognize there might be some benefits to religion. Right. I mean, I know you guys know Adam Friended. He's a big advocate for that. He gets into the myopic details of what's called meme theory. The religion has been passed on very similar to evolutionary processes, and has provided societal support. And that might be true. There might be some argumentation for that. But I think Neil and I come from a position, and correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, that even though they have had support in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has reason to continue in the future. And so if over time, if seculars studies do start becoming more secular and start losing religiosity, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's going to be detrimental to society. I think maybe quite the opposite. Matter of fact, I would love to have two comparative Earths. One that has, some kind of religiosity very similar to what we have now or 2,000 years ago, and one that's completely secular, that has no religion. They think of gods just like they would have, the tooth fairy is something, and I hate using those analogies, but most people believe the tooth fairy doesn't exist. Although I have had atheists go, I'm agnostic on that. I'm like, really? How old are you? I seriously, look, atheist, let me just give you a word of advice. If you are an atheist and you cannot say that you believe there are no such things as like tooth fairy or Santa Claus, you need to go read a book. You need to go read a little about philosophy, because that to me is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard atheists say when they, I don't have a position on that. I'm agnostic on Santa Claus. I'm like, look, if you're over 5, you're not thinking too well on basic philosophy there. But I would love to have those comparative. I would love to see 2 societies where we can say, which one is more productive? Because I got to tell you, Jonathan, I hate to say it, but I really think that the secular society would probably be more productive and more beneficial.
Once again, it's hard to tell. It'd be nice to have that enough time with the secular society, apart from a predominantly Christian
she
world.
agrees with you, it looks like.
She's arguing her point.
Right. Oh man, I got to tell you, I miss my daughter.
Convinced.
I miss my daughter at that age, right? I mean, yeah, at that age, you disagree with them, absolutely. Yeah. My daughter turns 17 soon. It's a long time. What is she? Your daughter, like a year, 6 months?
She's almost 11 months, but we do have a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Oh my good God, get a hobby.
Yes, I know.
He's like that is my hobby.
Broken those nights. But I still have to go on what we have experienced through the ancient civilizations, and seeing what contributions, even the Hellenistic philosophy brought, for over 600 years. I think the gods served a purpose. It did in the Roman Empire as well. And I think, Christianity was a fulfillment in many ways, in obviously rooting out some of the bad of these practices. I think even Julian the Apostate, who tried to restore paganism, did kind of model, a Christian framework into that, to kind of unify the gods, bring in some of the fabric of Christianity into it. Now, obviously, it didn't work. It didn't last too long. But they realized that those civilizations. So my only fear is, does the secular worldview then eventually get us back to paganism? Not to saying it would, but is there that fear that we can go back to those times? And I don't know. We would need your separate Earth theory to.
Yeah. Well, I think we all agree that there has been a lot of things that religion has given to society, especially in the arts and literature and the music and look, these things can be added without having an actual belief in God, though, right? I mean, you can have spiritual music, you can have arts depicting all these type of iconography. You don't actually have to have that belief that God exists in order to do that kind of stuff. And so, even though it's added a lot to society, I just don't see why, if it didn't continue, what would be losing. We could still have many of this, if not all the same things, just with the recognition that we don't have to be subservient to some type of deity when, as Neil pointed out, it's based upon the concept that we have sinned. It's based upon the concept that we are flawed people, that we need some kind of salvation, and we need to live our lives contingent upon that if we ever want to, like, be reunited with God or have eternal life, which presents a whole different amount of problems. As a matter of fact, I really do want to have a discussion one day on the problem with eternal life, because eventually you're going to get bored. Eventually you're going to see all, do all. It psychologically speaking, eternity is a very, very long time. And so I don't think Christians have ever really, that I've read, thought out what it would be like to have an eternity where you've done everything. And there's a great show on TV, if everybody gets a chance to watch it, called The Good Place.
Yep.
And
yes,
brilliant.
My wife and I love that.
Oh my God. I think I'd had a tear when that show ended. It was so well written and so brilliant. But that's one of the things that they dive into very strongly on that particular concept. But we can have a society where we don't have to worry about that. We're like, hey, look, we live our life. Whatever happens, happens. Because here's the reality is, all of us have our own beliefs, all of us have our own positions, but nothing we do is going to change whatever the fact of the matter is. Whatever the fact of the matter is, nothing we do will change that. Nothing. And that's an objective fact that I think we all have to like come to terms with. And I think secular humanism has come to terms with that. Say, look, if there is something, we'll deal with it afterwards. But if not, what are you going to do?
Right.
That's my position.
I agree.
Yeah, it's obviously it's deeper than
yeah. Honestly, and I know you got plans tonight. And I know you got to go. It looks like you have got a handful. So I'll kind of wrap this up. Let me give about a 2-minute closing statement. Jonathan, you went first, I believe, right? So
yes,
I'm going to give you now, and then Neil give us the last word, and we'll kind of take us out. Sound good? By the way, this was fun. I really enjoyed it. I don't really much get into theological discussions like this. To me, they usually typically are boring. But I got to tell you, both of you guys have really good points of views on this. I'm really impressed. Not fronting. Go ahead.
I had fun too.
We're New Yorkers, so we try to make things fun. But once again, thanks, Steve, for having me on. Thanks, Neil, as always. Always enjoy our conversations. As I stated in my opening, I always wonder what the world would have looked like. And this is one of the points that Dr. Ehrman brings up in his work, The Triumph of Christianity. World be if it wasn't for Christianity? What would modernity look like? While we probably wouldn't have Michelangelo or Leonardo or Bach or any of these musicians or artists that we're used to, what would society look like? Would society continue, in its pagan views of temple sacrifices, infanticide, a different moral framework, this idea that the poor, the weak, the widows should all be despised, and we should aspire to be one of the Greek hoplites, or this notion that comes out of the Homeric epics. What would society look like if it wasn't for Christianity coming on scene when it did, and going through this cultural transformation? So for me, at the end of the day, when I look at is the Christian worldview the logical prospect for society, I say we do. I believe if Christianity did not come on scene, the world would have continued operating like it had. The systems of the old system, even in Aristotle's democracy, it was still all dependent on a slave system supporting that. For me, I think it's important, for those that are out there to look at what Christianity did to Western civilization, and where do those values come from? Do they go back to the Bible? These ideas of the world is good, that what I believe led to science, modern medicine, human rights, a redeeming of our time. So it's just things to consider, things that I believe win. But thank you again, Steve and Neil, for hearing my thoughts on this.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Neil.
Yeah. Just to close out, just want to say, I think that if the New Testament, which claims to be a fulfillment of the Old Testament, contradicts what it claims to be, and if the Old Testament is not even historical, if we can look at the Old Testament and say, okay, that didn't happen, this didn't happen, or the Messiah is supposed to be this, but he actually does this, then I think there's some problems there. Why should I take it seriously? Especially when you have a God who's omni, but the things that he creates, he blames the things that he creates on what they do if he created them that way. So I think there's some problems there. I think that when it comes to the progress of society, I think we can look outside of religion and see where these things come from. I think before Christianity, the Greeks, for example, the Stoics, the people living in Athens with democratic republics, I think these are all where we get all these ideas from. And I think that we should worry about how to save the world here, right now. Worry about climate change, worry about human rights, rather than being selfish and saying, I just need to go to heaven. I think that's where the difference is, in my personal opinion. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, live in the here and now, because that's all we all of us have some kind of certainty that at least we have existence. We all agree that, you know, some reality does exist. These are, you know, homogenous beliefs that I think every rational agent has, is that there's something that at least exists, whether it just be the self or the id or whatever. We have something that constitutes what makes us us. And that, I think, what we all need to concentrate on. This is, I think, for the benefit of ourselves, then we have the benefit for society. This is why I think that a lot of people that get into these topics, they do want to add something to the dialogue. They do want to add something to the discussion. And I've noticed, especially recently, there have been a lot more people formulating their own positions. They're not just going along with the paradigm. They're not just going along with what they hear on some YouTube video. They're not just watching the Atheist Experience or something and going, oh, look, I'm going to pair what Matt Dillahunty says. No, they've actually been formulating very unique and novel ideas. Like, I don't know if you follow Ben Watkins from Real Atheology. But him and Scott Clifton and numerous other people have really dived into these topics and coming up with some very interesting arguments. People know that I have my own novel arguments as well. I would say super novel. I mean, everything's derivative, obviously, but I think that is something that most of us really want to get more into. Is how is it that we, by bettering ourselves, will better society? Because, you know, I think we're all good people here. Look, there's people that think we're not. I mean, there's obviously all three of us have detractors, but screw them, right? Who gives a shit? But the reality is that. You know, we come with an honest dialogue. We have these discussions, and so I'm trying to facilitate more. So if you know people that want to come on, I am booked until May. And I will tell you though, on the 12th, which is what is that Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday. We're going to have the most definitive debate of all time, and so I'm going to let you guys know what that is, because it's going to be hell. It's going to be very controversial. It's going to be very much of a dumpster fire. You guys want to know what it is?
Yeah, I definitely.
It is an age-old question that just needs to come to fruition, that we need to have an answer to, and that is, are hot dogs sandwiches? Good night.
That's a deep one right there.
It's deep. Good night,
you know, as a New Yorker, I would say no.
Do you guys, you know, before I end this, do you guys want to know my opinion on it now, or should I wait?
Sure.
I have an opinion on it. I really do.
Yeah.
I'm actually in the position that hot dogs are not sandwiches.
What? Yeah, I think it's just a roll, right? Hot dog roll, right?
We'll discuss it on the 12th, so it gives you guys a little time to prepare. But I'm willing to change my position on that, but I am going to go with, as of right now, hot dogs and not sandwiches.
I agree.
All right, guys. I'm going to end this call and I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you guys both for coming on. This was, like I said, I love these types of discussions. I think they're fruitful. I think that people can show that people can have different perspectives and have honest dialogue, because God knows on the internet, there's such crap dialogues out there. There's people that are just not willing to have these discussions because they don't either know about it, or they just don't have any kind of intellectual honesty. And both you gentlemen have intellectual honesty, and I respect that immensely. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Good night.
See ya.
Good night.